Okay. Welcome, everybody, to the August 11th special public meeting of the Kensington Police Protection and Community Services District Board of Directors. My name is Len Welsh. I'm the president of the board. This time I'll take roll call. Vanessa Cordova.
Here. Pat
Gillette.
Here.
Chuck Toombs.
Present.
Rochelle Sherris-Watt.
Here.
Okay, we have a full board here. That's a good thing. I guess what we should do is take public comments before we go any further, and this would be comments not related to the items on the agenda. If you have comments related to the items on the agenda, please hold them for when that comes up.
It's been so long, Mabry Benson here. It's been so long since I looked at the agenda, but I have a comment about procedure for the ad hoc committee. Is that appropriate now or later?
Later, I think.
Okay.
Anybody else? Katya, are you going to make a comment?
I made a list of the top 10 reasons for restructuring, why we need to look at restructuring. So I don't think that's directly on the agenda. Number 10, the dysfunctional police department eats up all of our collective time and attention, so we can't address other important issues like the lack of a post office, noise problem, sustainability, improving the community center, and other quality of life issues. Number 9, human beings are flawed. A single big man as sole authority intrinsically leads to, at best, poor decisions, mistakes, and self-interest at the expense of Kensington. More usually, as we have seen, sole dictators lead to corruption and abuse of power. Number 8, financial picture of the district is unknown. Financial statements and government-mandated audits have not been done in a timely fashion. I won't belabor that point. Lack of transparency and accountability. 7, racism, sexism, classism, bullying, and chilling of free speech in Kensington by the police and board. There are many examples of this.
Katya, could I ask you to try to speak up? We have a little hearing problem going on here.
Okay, sorry. More volume. Okay, is there more volume? Okay,
well, we believe it is recording.
It's such an important one. Racism, sexism, classism, bullying, and chilling of free speech in Kensington by police and board, and there are many examples of this. 6, Harmon got rid of most of the employees of the district or the Kensington Police Department and replaced them with his own people whose main qualification is loyalty to him. These same employees carried out acts of the previous number 7. There doesn't seem to be any way of disciplining or firing them. 5, with a strong police union, the Police Bill of Rights, well-funded lobbies for the police in Sacramento, and high police salaries affording the luxury of lawyering up at the first sight of trouble, ordinary citizens are now second, third, and fourth-class citizens under a new overclass. We can't control the department, the personnel, or their demands. 4, the small 5-person part-time volunteer board historically is unable and unwilling to supervise the police department. 3, no police review board, no mechanism for reviewing complaints about the police department, no complaint process at all for reviewing complaints about the general manager, chief of police. Anyone who thinks Kensington has control over its police department is seriously delusional. 2, a police head of department and a general manager are different skill sets which are hard to find in a single person. 1, we're running out of money. As structured, the police takes over 90% of the district's resources and yet needs more and more money. Running deficits despite tax hikes over the years and now the yearly CPI increases available for Measure G. The police department always seems to need yet more money. $1 million in legal expenses over the last X number of years. So there's the top 10 reasons I came up with for restructuring, and these are things that are happening, and then there's also the question of how we apply values to them and what we want. For example, it seems like pretty much everybody in Kensington does not want to annex themselves to El Cerrito. That very few people seem to be in favor of that. So the question of what to do is really tied both to how one sees the problems, what value one places on the problems, and what one really wants.
I'm sorry. I'm thinking, not you, Katya. I'm thinking maybe if you sat over there by the mic, by that speaker, you'd be able to hear better, and we can move the speaker over for you. You want to try, give that a try? Because I know you're not hearing. Was everybody able to hear what she said? Well, we're doing our best. My suggestion is that if you move, we can move that speaker over to the seats, and you could sit right next to it, and I think you'd be able to hear better. Much louder over there, yeah. And Kevin, maybe you could move that closer to the seat.
Now that I
Gonna try again?
yes, now that I see an agenda, what I'm going to say is not, it's relevant, but it's not an item on the agenda. And my question is, why are you stretching out the work of the ad hoc committee to investigate the options for structuring the police force? Why not, to start off, get this committee started ASAP, not wait another month until September. Do it in August. We've got 3 weeks left. It has already been delayed long enough. They should meet often. They should meet at least twice a month.
Well, wait a minute. Aren't we doing that tonight? Aren't we picking the committee tonight?
You're picking the committee, but you're not. I'm talking about the scheduling and getting this show on the road and moving.
Well, that's going to be up to the committee in large
and
part.
that's why I'm making this comment.
Okay.
Okay. The GM COP separation should be moved to the top of the schedule so it is investigated before a permanent hiree is made. And note that in 2009, a report about contracting out made by Brown Taylor took only a couple of months to produce. This schedule is not cast in stone, as was discussed at the last board meeting. Mr. Toombs agreed to that all aspects of the schedule would be flexible. So again, I'm going to reiterate, get the process going and not delay according to the stretched out formula that was presented. Thank you.
Mrs. Benson, I have one recommendation, that when the committee finally convenes as a group, that you present that list again.
Yes, I haven't erased it. Thank you.
Donna Stanton. I basically want to ditto what Mabry just said, because when I was reading the minutes, or whatever we're calling it, the plan, it was clearly cutting off. I mean, it had months going until I think it was November 2016, which scared me. It seems to me that a really relevant task force, which is basically what this is, should be able to operate more quickly than that, so that we can get the rest of our governance moving. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Ciara? Frank, are you able to hear better over there? Good.
Hi there, I'm Ciara Wood. Having served on the Park Advisory Committee some years ago, Chuck was on that committee, Bruce Morrow was on that committee, quite a number of us were. You really cannot say how long that discussion is going to take. What I do want to say about the kind of discussion which I think needs to go on here is that it needs to be a thorough discussion. It needs to be a discussion with some serious reflection of options over a period of time. Because in the middle of the night, you may say to yourself, wait a second, what was it we just said? Maybe that's not right. So I just want to draw back from saying how quickly it has to be done. We do need to do this thoroughly and methodically.
Okay, that's an interesting contrast of opinions.
I actually agree with Ciara. I actually think this process will at least take minimum 20 months, which is not a very popular position to take. But just convening the five of us for any given meeting, as Len knows, is difficult, particularly in the summer months, which is why I think we're beginning the process in September and not immediately tomorrow.
Okay, if there are no further public comments, then let's get on with the business we came here to do tonight. General Manager Hart, General Manager Chief Hart, would you begin, please, by letting us know who's dropped out and who's dropped in and where we're at with the applications?
Absolutely. Just a quick update. Since we posted the agenda, we've received a couple of withdrawals. Number one is Paul Doro is asked based on the time commitment. Julie Stein has wanted to drop out. And then we have 3 people that are interested that are not here tonight. And that's Lisa Corona, Charles Reckman, and Christopher Deppy. Those are 3 that are... Okay, great. So I got an email saying that, okay. Okay, perfect. And then you have Simon's, Brafman's application on your dais.
Simon Brofman.
Brofman, I'm sorry, thank you. And then, so he sent me an email, and I was trying to be inclusive of all, of any emails as well. And once he realized that he did not fill out an application, he says, I want to fill out an application. So you have an unredacted copy of his application. If needed, I can, if people wanted to see it, he is willing to tell me if he wants to release it redacted, or they can get it from me after I redact it. I have not redacted for purposes of the directors. So that's pretty much the update. Other than that, I have not specifically taken roll, but people have been told on a couple different occasions when the committee was originally formed, and then we sent a reminder invite email for tonight. There was no specific direction as to interview time, so I did not want to set that without board direction. So throwing it back to you, Mr. President.
Okay, just one thing. We have, was Simon's application late?
No, his email was not late.
Okay, and how about, we had one late application, didn't we?
Yes, Steve Bates did send his application after the deadline, but I did include it, again, to be included, but I did, it's one of the agenda items to identify if you're going to accept the late application in light of everyone that has submitted their application on time.
Okay, well, we can get to that in a moment. I'm going to ask either Chuck or Vanessa to brief the board on how you would like to see this process proceed at this point.
It's unusual to have an interview process when each board director has effectively 2 votes. I've reviewed the applications and I feel confident in my appointees. I would not be opposed to any of the candidates who are present to come up and make a brief statement if they choose.
But you don't consider that a requirement?
I don't, and I don't consider
I don't either, by the way.
Attendance a requirement. You can't hear me?
I just didn't hear the last one.
I don't consider attendance this evening to be a requirement. In fact, one of my appointees cannot attend tonight, and I'd like to make that appointment in absentia.
Yeah, I personally agree with both of those points.
We actually hadn't discussed what kind of protocols to put in place tonight, and it's really a question of what the board's pleasure is and what the community wants to see from its applicants. Maybe people just get up and make a 3-minute speech and that's enough. I don't know. It's really a question of fairness to all of you. You've put a lot of time into these applications. I did have a couple of questions to ask, but I don't mind putting them in abeyance. And I don't mind if people are not here tonight either. So we're trying to be as flexible and as easy on this as possible. We had some debate about whether we even wanted to have interviews, and I didn't bring my notes from the last meeting to see if we ever resolved that issue or not.
Well, could I make a suggestion then that if somebody wants to come up and make a statement, please feel free to do so. Don't feel required to do so. Please keep it brief. That makes sense to everybody?
I'm fine with that. I'm comfortable with that.
All right. Well, then. Go ahead.
I personally would like to hear from the candidates who are here tonight. I personally would like to hear from the candidates who are here tonight. If that doesn't become too burdensome, I don't know how many people are here. And I don't find not being here a disqualifier either.
How about a 3-minute speech? There's 20 people. That would be about 60 minutes? Thanks.
And if someone chooses not to, it's fine too.
That's fine. If anyone wants to share perhaps why they are interested in serving on this committee, I think that's...
Well, that's kind of what I was saying. If they want to come up and give a speech, they can, but they don't have to, right? Are we in agreement on that? Yes. Okay.
Is it the pleasure of the board that I keep a timer?
Yes.
Yes, not to exceed 3 minutes, I think, Chuck, right?
Mrs. Taylor.
Come on up, please, to the podium.
I have a concern about the lack of a plan, because if each one of you have already decided on who you're choosing, then what's the point of this meeting? I came here to hear, so I have no vote about it, and I'm not trying to be in the running for any of it, but there are people here and a lot of people put in, and I took the time to read about each one. And so it seems already biased just by virtue of having said you've chosen your person. So what is the point of all of this?
Well, I'd like to clarify that. We each have 2 picks each.
I understand.
And it's possible that Chuck may steal my first choice. And so all I did is review the applications and rank them in order of who I thought was the strongest candidate. And that's not to say that I wouldn't be swayed by anything that was said here or not said here, but I'm sort of competing in a way with 4 other board members in terms of my choice.
You know, it's kind of like any job application. You start out with the application and you make some preliminary you develop some preliminary preferences, and then the interview, if the person wants to come to an interview, helps you figure out if you're going in the right direction. So I think the best compromise, say if anybody wants to come up and make a pitch for being picked, then please do, but don't feel like you're forced to do it.
So I agree with Donna, to tell you the truth. I thought that's what we were going to do today, is have people get up and tell us why they want the job. Because some of the people's applications explained why they wanted it, and other people's didn't.
So are you going to disqualify them if they don't want to?
I'm not going to disqualify anybody, but I personally, as I said before, would like to hear from the candidates.
Well, I would too. I just don't want to force them to do it, that's all.
I think we can ask them to do it.
Yeah.
All right, so is that what we're going to do then? We're going to ask the candidates to come up and give a statement, one by one. And again, don't feel forced to do it. And the fact that you don't will not disqualify you. The fact that somebody couldn't show up tonight will not disqualify them. I think that's kind of the ground rules. Okay? Rochelle?
I think I would like to be able to ask a question should something come up or arise, if that's all right. I have not made my mind up. I was hoping this process would illuminate and we would elaborate so that we could build the very best committee for this community that we can. But because of the way that notices went out and because of the way vacation happens, I don't want to disqualify someone for not being able to be here. So that is my one caveat.
Fair enough. All right, so would anybody like to be first?
My name is Richard Carlson. First of all, I need to apologize. I didn't realize that we would have formal resumes and that sort of thing, so my application isn't the neatest, but at this point in time, I'm retired, and that is not something I'm interested in doing at this point. First of all, I want to thank the board for their service to this community. I think it's a lot of work for you to do. I also thank you for your patience. I, by background, am an attorney. I represented the Alameda County Counsel's Office in civil law for 30 years, where that was a public defender, where that was a health administrator. Done a lot of litigation in my career, and in many ways, I think what I could best do is serve the committee as a consultant as opposed to be on the committee. And the reason I say that is because I am someone who has a lot of background in these issues, but because I'm retired now and I travel a lot, I will be gone for a fair amount of time in September. I will be gone a fair amount of time in October. So I just thought I'd want to pass that on. I understand it's an ad hoc committee. I'm available by phone. I am available by email when I travel, but I may not be able to make all those meetings, and I want to disclose that from the get-go about my background and what I'm available to do and what I'm not. I think I do have a lot of expertise in representing boards. I think I do have a lot of past history in negotiating contracts with law enforcement agencies. I represented the Sheriff's Department, which Chief Hart came from. So I do have that sort of background, and I do have that experience. Luann Texera, who I notice is head of LAFCO, used to work for the County Administrator's Office, so I know her well as some of the others. So I am happy to do this, but you need to know at the same time I do have some restrictions on my time. And if that is acceptable, I'm happy to serve. I'm happy to serve in a consulting role as well. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer your questions.
Which would you rather do?
I notice that you all have a great deal of patience. Patience is not one of my virtues. So I might be better off in the role of a consultant. I'll be quite frank about that. On the other hand, I was asked to submit my application. I'm happy to submit my application. I'm happy to serve the community. But at the same point in time, my background is litigation. I represent other people's interests, primarily not my own. I have no particular view on any of the issues that have come before this committee. I'm very glad to see what your board has done thus far. I first got involved because of, for lack of a better term, the Reno incident. And I've been very pleased with what this board has done since that incident. And I was very pleased to see that Chief Hart has instituted what I knew as the cardinal sins in Alameda County. And I think that's a wonderful start. So I think you're on a great road, and I think you have a good committee to look at these options. I'm very interested in seeing what those options are. If you want me as part of that committee, I'm happy to meet with people. I interview a lot of people, as I have in terms of my legal career. But if you would like me to serve as a consultant and go out and see people, I'm happy to do that as well.
So just to be clear, you're suggesting that you would volunteer to serve as a consultant if you were not picked?
Yes, I would.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for your candor.
Sure. Any other questions? Thank you.
I'm Mabry Benson. I have to find where I start. I'm not a lawyer, never have been, and I think there's an advantage there because many lawyers present only the facts that support their position, the position they want to promote, rather than all the facts. I'm a former scientist and now an experienced and respected genealogist. Both of those skills are evidence-based. You gather the evidence, and then you make an evaluation, and you try not to prejudge. That's not to say you don't have an opinion ahead of time, but the key is to remain open-minded and to gather as much information and then see where it takes you. And I thank you for having the opportunity that a committee is looking into these problems that have been part of this community.
I just want to say I'm impressed to know that you're a chemist. I never would have guessed. And I think we have a couple other chemist applicants, but that does bring interesting
NMR,
expertise
in
into
case
the mix.
anybody knows anything about that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well,
I suffered through organic chemistry.
So did I.
I'm Leonard Schwartzberg, and I don't want to really make a statement.
A little louder, please.
I'm Leonard Schwartzberg, and I don't really want to make a statement. I've said what I had to say in the application and my vita. I think they speak for themselves. I just want to give you an opportunity to ask me any questions that you might have.
I actually liked your thought that you were prepared to cross over and actually be in a service capacity instead of a contract capacity.
Well,
Did I say that right?
I appreciate that. Well, not exactly.
Well, okay.
I said transition from being a critic, which I think is of service and has been of service, to actually coming inside the tent and seeking solutions to the problems that I've been criticizing. And I think I have a good fund of ideas, and some of them are creative ideas. I think I helped to solve the garbage contract problem because Pat was kind enough to take cognizance of my suggestion that we use SurveyMonkey. And I think that that's a very good vehicle for the committee to use. Well, it's a very good vehicle for the board to use once the committee has helped to formulate the kinds of questions that we want to ask of the community and find out what the community wants. I think that's really a very important thing. And as I see the job, it's to conceptualize the issues and frame them in terms of questions that can be put to the community by something like SurveyMonkey. So that, I think, is the way I think of the function of a committee.
How do you find time to write all those publications? You got a lot there.
Leonard was a probation officer, which is what I found sort of.
I was a probation
Yeah,
officer. That's how I
fascinating.
got started
I knew
in
that.
my field. I really enjoyed, more than enjoyed, I felt really fulfilled by the opportunity to help people who were in a lot of trouble change their lives. And I was able to do that with some, not most, but with some, and that really convinced me to go into this field of trying to, well, it sounds pretentious maybe, but I don't feel pretentious about it, of being a healer. And that extends to social groups as well, the community. And that's what I would like to contribute to as a healing of this community, which has been bitterly divided. And it's time for us to come together, because if we do come together, there's so much we can accomplish. So much good. Any other questions?
Quickly, the time commitment's not a problem for you?
No, it's not.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Mickey Tall. I didn't prepare anything. I didn't know we'd have to.
Could I get you to talk a little louder, please?
Mickey Tall. I didn't really prepare anything, but I was kind of approached by several people to apply for the position, which is why I did it, and I'm happy to kind of have input and participate in the process. I was a DA in a couple of jurisdictions, and I was a public defender, and currently I work for myself. But I have worked with law enforcement. I've examined law enforcement on the stand, so I've kind of been on both sides of things. And, I think there's some basic things like quality control and checks and balances and things that are kind of obvious to anyone who is not even has my background. But I think I've had insight into how that works, and to the extent, that I can participate and help the community, I'm happy to do that. I've lived here for about almost 10 years, and I have 2 pretty young children, and I'm happy to contribute. So, any questions for me? Thank you.
Any questions for Vicki?
Real quickly, the timing's not a problem for you. People are expressing concern about the duration and/or how much of a time commitment they can make. That's not a problem for you.
Is it clear what the time commitment is?
That's going to be what the committee comes up with, I'm afraid, so it's not clear.
Okay, so...
Substantial would be my guess.
Substantial? I don't know. I guess it's kind of a vague... You're not really telling me what the...
Well, it's hard to tell you because we don't know. We really structured this committee so it could set its guidelines. It has 4 main goals and tasks, how it schedules them. We have an outline of a proposed schedule, but it by no means controls. And the objective here was to have a committee who would get down, meet, start thrashing through this, prioritize for itself, and then, of course, let the board know so we don't see you going off on the tangent. And I don't know how much time that will take. I just don't know. I know that when we did the Parks Committee way back in the mid-'90s, it was clearly once a month and then sometimes more, and lots of Saturdays for town hall meetings. So there is a time commitment here, a time chunk. And we've already heard from a couple of people who are going to be gone and unable to make the first couple of months. So that's a problem. If it's a problem for you, speak now.
I don't know that it will be. I'm not going away in the next couple of months, but, monthly or twice a month meetings seem like that would be a reasonable commitment in what I would expect to be done, so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good evening, Jim Watt. I think most of you know me. I've been pretty heavily involved here in politics for the last year.
Better
Jim
speak up,
Watt.
please, Jim. Jim, please speak up. Louder.
All right. I think, can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
it, that's it.
I think that most of the board knows me because I've been pretty heavily involved in the Kensington political situation for the last year. I spent a lot of time analyzing these issues, and I have a couple of thoughts relative to what I hear the previous speakers reference concerning a time commitment. As I said, I've been thinking about the process that's going to be involved here. I listened to Pat Gillette the other night talk about some thoughts that she had, and I happen to concur with a lot of what you said in terms of breaking the committee down into possibly 3 or 4 different groups, each one being asked to analyze a particular facet of this subject, spending a lot of time learning about that particular facet, and by that, I think the time commitment's going to, as Mr. Welsh said, be substantial, because if, for example, you are looking at the possibility of contracting out, I would certainly think it would behoove that committee to spend time visiting other jurisdictions where they have tried this out, visiting with the staff, with possibly people on their finance committee or whatever it is, in order to get some understanding about how that sort of thing is working out. Likewise, with the possibility of consolidation, somebody needs to obviously spend time talking with the fire department, looking at how all that's going to work. Yes, I think this is a big time commitment, but I think that if the people that are involved in this have, and this is a lot of daytime, I might add, a lot of people might think this is just going to be meeting in the evenings, but I think in order to do what I'm talking about, you're going to have some daytime commitment to go out and make these contacts. Nevertheless, I think if we have some energized people, I think this thing can be done in a relatively short time, as in 6 to 9 months. And I think we can come back and the 4 groups kind of discussing everybody's position paper and kind of being the party that will provide the feedback to really bring clarity to the subject. So I think the process could be a very good one, and if you elect to put me on this committee, I'd be more than happy to do it. I have a consulting practice, which I hate to give up time to because this job doesn't pay, but I'm happy to do it and would look forward to it. Thank you.
Before you go, Jim, you raised a couple of points I wanted to ask our council about. One of them is, Randy, this is a Brown Act committee.
Yes, it's a
Okay.
committee created by the legislative body.
If we were to fragment it into subgroups, which may have merits, and I don't disagree, each subgroup's meetings would have to be duly noticed as well, or could we do that? I don't know. That's why I'm asking you. We didn't really flesh through this.
Yeah, can I get back
Yes.
to you on both questions? Because if
Sure.
it's an ad hoc committee, there are different Brown Act rules that apply. I have the Brown Act here. Let me take a look at it.
Okay.
And I'll report
It
back a little
doesn't have to
later.
be answered tonight, because when this committee gets together, they're going to thrash through that. But I think we need to tell them, if they can, bifurcate into subgroups like that. The other thing, one last thing, and I hate to take up the time here. One of the reasons we put this together the way we did was because we thought each discrete group would build off the other, so that there was some kind of continuity. But again, that's a committee decision. It's just what I thought would be reasonable. Reasonable minds can differ.
I just want to acknowledge the time you've already put into research for us. It's been substantial, and I, for one, appreciate it.
I had one question for you, Jim. Are you going to stay on the Finance Committee as well? I don't know. Okay.
My name's Simon Brofman, and I hope I'm close enough to the mic.
A little closer, please.
My name is Simon Brofman. First of all, I want to thank you for doing this. The idea of putting together a committee, I think, shows a lot of balls on your part, if I might put it in a very...
What was that term? I wasn't quite sure I heard that.
That's a bleep.
I think it's very courageous of you to open up to the community opportunity like this, not only in the sense of having community members involved, but just the idea of starting this process. So I commend all of you very much for that. I hope all of you know who I am because I ran for office. I was a little late in some of my paperwork because I had some medical issues which are now more or less resolved. And so I'm ready and willing to be part of this committee. My goal is to help to identify the problems and solve the problems. My professional background, I'm still a consultant. I work with startups now, but when I was with larger companies, I was in partnership management, business development, helping clients solve their problems, sometimes remotely, sometimes locally. But the key thing was understanding what the problem is. And I think that's going to be the big task. I think finding the solutions can be difficult, but identifying the problem, I think, is key. Very open to answering any questions, and I apologize if I'm not close enough to the mic.
So I'm actually interested in that comment, that you think the role of the committee would be to identify the problem, because that's not exactly how I see the committee. I see the committee as getting information about different variations of structure for the district. So
Well,
tell me what you mean by identifying the
okay.
problem and solving the problem.
If you want to change something, then I think it is your responsibility, the committee's responsibility, to understand why there needs to be a change. And I'm assuming that's what the problem is, okay?
Thank you for explaining.
Because if things are working fine, you know, you can always put a little polish on something, but you know, at the end of the day, I don't think that's what the committee's here to do. So I think the key thing is identifying those issues that require change. Is that a better way of stating it?
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
evening. My name is Bruce Morrow. I've been living in Kensington for the last, I have to use the mic again, sorry. I have been a volunteer within the community for almost the last 20 years. I started out on the Kensington Park Committee, which developed the master plan. That was with 19 people, which was a challenge in and of itself. But I think the way it was approached organizationally is how the committee which is currently being formed, should approach the issues that are seemingly at hand. I would agree with Pat that we shouldn't go in with assuming that there is a problem. I think, though, that it's always good to sit back and look at an organization or a department within an organization and determine whether or not it's fulfilling its role and meeting what is required of it by the community. Professionally, I did this on a number of occasions. Looked at large departments within a corporation of 10,000 employees, and we spent quite a bit of time looking at how it worked, but we also had the opportunity we were given the opportunity by the executive board to really spend the due diligence that was required. Many times there were always questions back from the vice presidents, why is it taking so long? But considering that there were 2,000 employees involved in this transition to a new business model, it does take that. And this is a community of 5,000 people. It's a small department, granted, but I think it's a very important part of this community. And as a volunteer, I also was on KCC, I was the president for 5 years of the Kensington Community Council. I was also a member of this board for 8 years, from 1998 to 2006, 3 times president. And I just appreciate the board giving us an opportunity, hopefully, to work within, I'm sorry, why am I so nervous? I do this all the time.
Can I interrupt you with a question?
Sure.
Since you were chair of the Park Implementation Committee.
Co-chair of the implementation.
Co-chair. Sorry, co-chair. I understand, it's my understanding, and maybe Chuck, you can help me, that all 18 applicants for that committee were appointed. Do you feel the size that we're proposing here of 10 committee members is robust enough?
I think it is, although I always believe that if you're going to set up a committee, it should be an odd number. Because quite frankly,
we just have odd people.
Yeah, you may run into situations where you're attempting to reach a consensus or at least a majority opinion, and you can't because you have equally opposing sides. So that's my only comment on that. I think 10 is an appropriate size, however. 19 was a challenge, but we had a very good coordinator, and he pulled us through what we needed to do.
Just one thing to add to that, since we aren't really, I don't know that there'll be a need for a tiebreaker vote because the charter for this committee, I'm sorry, Frank, the charter for this committee really is about providing alternatives and defining them for us. So it's not a question of we have to have a majority vote and take one alternative. It's going to be a question of, well, gee, there's 5 different alternatives. Let's brief them all for the board and for the community.
You're correct.
So that would take away the notion of having to have an odd number.
Exactly. Yes. So, anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Len, can we take a brief 5-minute break and let people regroup and... Sure.
At Rochelle's request, we're going to take a brief 5-minute break. It'll make it that much more dramatic when you speak, Paul. Heroes, Paul Haxo was about to speak, but Chuck wants to say a few words first.
2 things. I promised Maria Adrians that we would wait to make sure that her husband had a chance to speak to the group, so we won't make any decisions till he gets up here, and she went down to pick him at BART. So they'll be back in 20 minutes, hopefully. Okay? I'm sorry, I have to stick to the microphone.
So, yeah, in 20 minutes, we should be having somebody come and give a comment, so we can't make a decision until then. Okay.
Chris works down at Apple, and it takes him a long time to get back and forth.
Chris Depp, is that the?
Chris Depp, yeah.
Okay.
And secondly, our attorney, Randy, has a comment about the questions I posed to him earlier.
So I took a look at the Brown Act. It's a little bit tricky in this situation. So normally anybody created by the board is a legislative body. That is not the case for an ad hoc body that consists solely of members of the board, which this is not, and therefore the
members of the community.
No, of the if you formed a committee, like you had an earlier ad hoc committee with just a couple of members of the board, those are not subject to the Brown Act.
Okay.
That's not what this is, and therefore it is a legislative body subject to the Brown Act. Now, if that body wishes to create advisory committee that consists solely of its members, that those advisory bodies to the main advisory body would not be subject to the Brown Act.
Sounds like a pyramid scheme.
Yeah, it really does. Like I said, it's a little bit confusing, but the
So we found a loophole in the Brown Act.
well, but it needs to be that the advisory committee would have to, I mean, this committee creates its own advisory subcommittee. Those would not be
Those
subject to the
subcommittees will
Brown
not
Act
be.
as long as they consisted solely of members of that body.
Is there the same limitation, though? There can't be more than 2 or 3 or whatever that ridiculous limitation is?
Yeah, it has to be less than a quorum of the primary body. I assume that would be the case.
So welcome to the Brown Act. Lucky, lucky.
Wait, I just lost you on that last question. So this subcommittee that's created
So you're going
by
to have 10 members.
Hold on a second. The
Yeah.
subcommittee that's created by the 10-member committee is not subject to the Brown Act and is not subject to a number of members talking limitations? Is that what you're saying?
No, so it would have to consist of less than a quorum of the 10. So it would have to be
Okay.
5,
Got it.
actually 5 members or less, I guess. I mean, 6 would be a quorum.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Oh, and as someone who learned to love the Brown Act, that also means that any subcommittee, if it's a committee of 4 people, can't talk to anyone else on the committee about what they were working on. So it's to prevent something called a chain meeting. Okay, my name is Paul Haxo. I'm a political junkie. I was 10 years on this board. I've also been on the Finance Committee for 7 years. A community service district is a special kind of animal with very specific and very limited powers. Having served on the board, I have a real nuts and bolts sense of what the powers of a community service district are. In addition, I have to admit what my real concern is, and that's a little bit different from what some people are talking. People are talking about governance a lot and process and providing service, which I think are very important. But I think my real interest is in what is the long-term financial health of the district? How long will it be able to continue at a level of service that the population of Kensington comes to expect? I remember listening to a candidates debate for San Jose mayor a couple years ago, and the big discussion there was, hey, how are you going to create economic development so that San Jose can grow? That's not something we can do in Kensington. We have to find other ways to make sure that our financial house stays in order. And nor do I want to go the route of one discussion I heard on NPR recently, which was several communities in the Midwest which are failing, have discovered a new unfortunate sense of how to make things work. Tickets. The police write and depend upon 70% of their budget, up to 70% in some of these communities, for ticket income. God, let's not go there. And I'm sure the police... Yeah! But anyway, the chief is looking at me like, oh God, please don't ask me to do that. But anyway, I travel around the country. I just delivered my son to Iowa, where he's working on a certain campaign, which I'm not going to talk about too much. But it was real interesting as I stop off at every little diner. I would always pick up the little rag about the local politics scene. Everyone discussed transparency in local government. This is a problem that's facing a lot of public agencies today. It's just people don't know how to talk to their to their public agency, and vice versa. They don't know how to talk. So I'm very aware of that as a major problem, not just for us here in Kensington, but as for every small agency, how to make it happen so that people feel they are indeed seeing the skeleton beneath the skin, the muscles beneath the skin. Okay? So that's who I am. Any questions?
So, Paul, I'm a little bit concerned because the purpose of this committee is not really for many of the things that you just mentioned. The purpose is fact-finding on the various ways in which we might structure the district. Do you see this as your role as being different from that?
No. Any change in the form of governance, any change in the method by which services are provided will have financial implications. And because of that, that's where my sense comes in. It ties together. It's a holistic sense of what the project is.
So did I get you right that you think the financial health of the district is the #1 concern we have to face in the next several years?
That's my personal concern.
Okay. Just want to be clear on that.
I echo Mr. Watt's comments quite a bit. And although we may not agree on how to talk about it, we certainly have a very common interest.
Thanks.
You would characterize financial sustainability as a driver.
Yes.
Okay.
As a what?
Driver.
Key driver.
Driver.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next? Nice and loud, nice and loud.
So I'm still Katya de Neergaard, and I didn't prepare anything particularly to say, but I will say a few things. One is that I'm really impressed by all of the applications and how rich our community is with various fields and skill sets, and that everybody looked pretty qualified to crunch the numbers and find the facts, had the training, the education to do that. So I would like to speak to having a broad, both in terms of viewpoints and in terms of backgrounds on the committee, that I think people like me from the humanities have as much to contribute as lawyers and scientists. And in fact, my brief study of the law was informed very much by my study of comparative religion, where I could probably, well, yeah, it was pretty much the same skill set taken to the study of law. In terms of my particular skills that may be of benefit to the committee, one is process. As I said on my application, I do chair a number of committees and have done so for a number of years, maybe, well, off and on for years. And I see my role chairing committees is to help each person on the committee to bring their gifts and have everybody have a voice, have it, pretty equal, that everybody can speak, have a voice, have a contribution, and then to move the committees toward its goals. So I think I'd be helpful in that respect. And I think the other maybe special thing is I'm willing to stick my neck out, say the unpopular, and take action about it, as I did on Thursday and Friday, about something that was seeming off, and I didn't know quite what it was. I did have a very emotional reaction at first, and then, talked to my friend who was very experienced and found out that what normal practice was, addressed you all, and also took responsibility to let many of the other applicants know as well. So I'm a person who takes responsibility and action. And that's why I think I'd be very helpful to the committee. Oh, and one more thing, I'm very detail-oriented to the point of OC, obsessive-compulsive. I will look at long pages of numbers, and I will sort of remember the numbers, and make sure everything is perfect there.
Questions? Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
All right. Got to remember that you have to kiss the microphone just so. My name is Garen Corbett. In terms of demographics, let's see, I represent not being a lawyer, not being a scientist, not being retired, not for a long time. I have a 2-year-old. And being a fairly new resident to Kensington, homeowner for a little more than 3 years. And I think the comments from the last individual about looking for a well-rounded group, I do think that's important. I think part of my demographic as both a parent and as someone who plans to be in Kensington for a lot of years, which means long-term fiscal liabilities may end up on my pocketbook a bit more. So my day job is to provide independent analysis for the California legislature. I work with teams of faculty. And so I think, I bring that up because that's also a role of herding kittens, which in some ways is what I think any kind of citizen group, anytime you're involved with a lot of people on complex topics while trying to meet deadlines. It means that in my day job, I have to be mindful of personalities, egos, who has the right expertise, and mindful of limited resources. And so that's what I do as a day job, and I've done for the last 5 years at the University of California Office of the President. In the past, I've worked in state government. I've been a consultant to state governments and city governments around benefits, and particularly health benefits, as well as pension issues. And I personally come to a lot of the issues very much with an open mind, although I also do have a skew a little bit towards long-term concern around the fiscal trajectory for the district, as well as a risk management standpoint. I do think that we have to think about presenting options that mitigate as well as provide maximum benefits. But the mitigation is around cost as well as risk to our district. I do serve on the KPOA board, and I think that's another reflection of my commitment to and personal proclivity towards policy rather than politics, although I do admit I do watch the debates on TV because I just sort of like watching trains crashing against each other sometimes. But
Are you talking about our board meetings?
No. And finally, I just would like to add that in addition to sort of my background, I do serve on a number of task forces at the Office of the President. I end up on search committees, groups that focus on organizational effectiveness. I do think that I'm often included in those things because I do have a balanced take on things. I'm good at trying to help facilitate, and I'd be interested in serving the community. I will point out that although I have a full-time job and a 2-year-old, I am the director of my own group. I do have flexibility, so I have a lot of competing demands, but I do also have flexibility, including during the day. Thanks for your consideration.
Can I ask, Garen, one of the considerations we're looking at examining is contracting out with this committee. And it has been proposed that an agency that we might contract out with is UC Berkeley. Would you, at this time, find the need to recuse yourself from that particular examination?
Well, I'm not an officer of the Regents. I don't work at Berkeley. And so I don't think I would have any overt, especially since this group wouldn't be voting on recommendations. If I were in a position of voting on recommendations, probably out of an abundance of caution, I would recuse. But I don't see from exploring the issue fairly and unbiased.
Can we clarify something? The Office of the President is not the Office of the President of UC Berkeley. It's the Office of the President of the University of California statewide.
It's a system-wide office, exactly. Yeah, there's a chancellor at Berkeley and then the President's house, which is in Kensington but isn't being used. Right. Although we are supposedly actually looking at making some renovations there, but finally.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Dave Spath. I've lived in Kensington for more than 30 years, and this is probably the most important issue that the community is had to undertake, I would say, since I've been here. Police services are a critical issue, and it's important for this committee, this ad hoc committee, to come up with some very strong options for the board to consider. I think you have an excellent group of applicants, quite a bit of diversity, and I think you can put together a very fine, diverse ad hoc committee. My experience is in the public sector. I worked for the Department of Public Health for 33 years. It had several other names in its process, depending on who the governor was. But I operated and managed, at least for the last 10 years of my career, a multidisciplinary public health and environmental health program that had many statutory mandates, similar to what police services have, but also was limited in its physical resources. So I'm well aware of how having to manage a program that has certain mandates, yet has physical limitations. I've also been involved in a number of committees, both at the federal level and at the state level. I've chaired a federal committee for 3 out of the 5 years I was on that committee in the late 1990s, 2000. That would really date me, I know. And that committee had a diversity of opinion, so I'm quite familiar with working with people who have different opinions and yet reaching an end point, I think, that everybody would agree with. So, and I'm retired, and so I'm available anytime, any place, without any 24-day issues associated with it, like nuclear. But anyways, if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. Thank you.
I guess we're good. Thank you. Ciara, your turn.
Hi there, my name is Ciara Wood. Can everybody hear me? No. Okay, is this better?
A little bit closer, a little bit closer.
Even more.
Yeah,
Are we doing it now? Okay. My name is Ciara Wood. I grew up in Kensington as a child, returned as an adult, have lived in Kensington as an adult about 36 years. I became civically active in Kensington at the time of the community effort and the advisory votes to save Kensington Park. Served on KCC, served on this board with Bruce and Paul for 8 years. And since leaving that board, I've done a lot of fire safety work up on the hill, on the ridge, and I'm a director of Diablo Fire Safe Council. At the time that one of our previous chiefs left, Andrew Reed commented that there was an inherent conflict of interest in having that position shared, the general manager chief of police. And I really didn't see it at that point. I still remember Chief Ewell, who was the police chief here when I was a child at elementary school, with a great deal of fondness. This is certainly not something that we would have discussed during Jim Bray's time as police chief. I certainly did not feel that while Barry Garfield was our chief of police. But it is something that we need to discuss, and I'd like to be part of that discussion. I'm not a lawyer. What is it? Banker, baggerman, thief. No, I'm not a lawyer. I've been a community volunteer for years, and I'm interested in being part of the discussion. I have a background in theater, and the only reason I bring that up is because theatrical production is really not about actors. It's really about reading all the credits all the way to the very end. And all of those people making an important contribution. If you look at the credits for Amadeus, the Czech translated core is phenomenal. But I really mean this, that this is something to work together on. I also think that this is something we're dividing too quickly into smaller groups, I think will be counterproductive, because I think everybody who is on this committee will want to weigh in and be part of this of the full discussion. That's not to say that work groups may not develop, but I think there are also philosophical matters about how the police, within the life of our community, and about avoiding conflict of interest and how we protect not just the police, which we protect in this community, but how also the police, really, we view them in terms of a community service and something that is affordable. So any questions, guys?
I have one. Could you explain a little bit of detail for me about the Diablo Fire Safe Council so that and any possible conflict with the exploration that
I cannot imagine.
That's fine.
However, that's okay. I'd love to tell you all about the Diablo Fire Safe Council. Diablo Fire Safe Council is a 501c3 organization. We serve Alameda and Contra Costa counties. We help distribute funding for fuel reduction services in the two counties. These fundings come through federal grants, sometimes through U.S. Fish and Wildlife, but they are administered through the California Fire Safe Council. We are very fortunate in our current executive coordinator, Cheryl Miller, whom I listed as a reference, because if you do want to call her, not that that's a matter for you, she could give you a good idea of how I have functioned on that board as a director. We go out of our way to have community outreach and to help groups of neighbors understand that by working together, they can reduce fire hazards and to their directly surrounding their homes. And most recently, with the chief's application, Diablo Fire Safe has funded $5,000 out of the most recent grant cycle. From the 2010 grant cycle, I worked to organize 6 projects along the ridgeline, and Kensington ended up getting just shy of a third of all of the money that was given to Contra Costa County. This is because of direct advocacy, but also because I do a lot of person-to-person outreach. And I've done a lot of community outreach, whether it was on working for the advisory votes, but that's another thing that I do. Does that answer your question? Kind of? Mm-hmm. We also created the community
Sarah, I think we probably have enough information on it.
Cool. Sorry to take too much time.
Thank you. You didn't take too much time. Appreciate the explanation.
Hello, Gail Feldman. And I believe that one of the questions you started off with was just what our interest was in spending time on this ad hoc committee.
Could you just a little bit louder for us?
Yes, I will speak up. And my personal interest is really to work through these 3 issues that the board has outlined in your report, and to do an impartial analysis to the degree that we can, to give you the information that you need to make decisions, as well as to facilitate the process with the community, so that the community has a better understanding of what the issues are, the facts are, and to help you guide us as well as guide you to final decision making if there's a decision to be made through this process. So that's my real interest. I feel that I'm qualified to do that based on my own professional background, as well as my civic experience here in the community. So as you know, I served on this board back in 1996 through 98. I also was on the park committee that has been discussed. I'm the president of KPOA, so I've had over 20 years of dedication to this community. Also professionally, I've worked in public sector now for over 25 years. I just recently retired. During that time, I also was very active, both serving on committees as well as being staff to a number of commissions and task forces. So I have the experience of helping to facilitate these types of processes. And I could get into some detail. I think it's in my application, pretty well explained. But I have had a very good record of bringing committees to a final conclusion on the issues that were put forward to them by legislative bodies like yourself. I worked in Napa County for the Board of Supervisors, Solano County for the Board of Supervisors, San Francisco for the Board of Supervisors, and most recently for the city of Berkeley. So for all of those entities, I have done a number of, had to run a number of committees, and then I have also served on statewide committees as well. So with all of that experience, that's what I would hope to bring to this group to help facilitate it for you. Any questions?
Yeah, you can make the time commitment.
Yeah, I'm sure that there will be meetings. I won't be able to attend. That's if over 20 months, there's going to most likely be some time when I would not be able to be here. But as I said, I'm retired, so I do not have a conflicting work schedule at this point.
What was your last assignment with the city of Berkeley? Just curious.
As far as my position, or as far as the commission goes? Or?
Your mission.
My last, so I was recently the secretary to both the Community Health Commission and the Commission on Aging for the city of Berkeley. The Commission on, Community Health Commission had 18 members, which was very large. And then the Commission on Aging was a 9-member commission. They both found issues that they wanted to work on, as well as they had direct referrals from the city council. During the time I was there, we worked on public safety issues. We worked on GMO. We worked on the electronic cigarette ordinance for the city. So it was a number of different things, some where the commissions were very active in passing the legislation. So, and basically my role was to assist them through the legislative process and help them figure out and then do all the Brown Act activities and noticing and advising around what they could and could not do during those meetings.
Anything else? All right, thank you, Gail.
My name, can you hear me all right? How's that? Is that better now?
A little better.
Not much. Okay, I'll try. My name is Dr. Frank Lossie, and I'm not a candidate, so you don't have to remember my name. I'm just coming up here to call attention to something that I was able to hear with the assistance of Chairman Welsh by repositioning me, and it aroused a little note of concern in me. So I wanted to raise the question, particularly with the council. When you were talking about the Brown Act and whether or not it applied to this committee, I thought you said something to the effect that because this was not a part of the board, that it consequently was not restricted by certain parts of the Brown Act. But I just wanted to raise as a consideration now, before it might become an issue later, the two chairmen of the board, the co-chairmen of the board of the subcommittee that's being appointed or chosen now are actually board members. I don't know whether you're aware that the co-chairmen consist of Mr. Toombs and Ms. Cordova, and they are both board members. If that puts us in danger of violating the Brown Act. I just wanted to make sure that that's not an issue, so it doesn't become something later on. So that's what I wanted to call to your attention.
Do you want to, so you can hear, do you want to go back there so you can hear the explanation?
So just to clarify, what I said was that this advisory body would be subject to the Brown Act. You know, whether they're members of this body on it or not, it is subject to the Brown Act. So there may have just been a misunderstanding about what I had said.
So we've established that it is a Brown Act committee, and also I wanted to establish on behalf of Vanessa and I that we were the founding members of this committee, but we are not going to serve on it. This is going to be a citizens advisory committee. So we're really, by choosing people we think can manage this, we're putting the future of the district in the hands of the community, which is where it belongs anyway.
So Chuck, that means that one of the first things this committee is going to have to do is choose its chair and co-chair, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And those will not be board members.
Now, we can attend the meetings. I'm sorry, Celia. We can attend the meetings, but we're guests. We can't speak up except, well, actually, we probably can't even speak up.
Well, they're public meetings, so we can attend as members of the public, but we can't really participate.
So can I ask that we finish the interviews first?
Yeah,
I
could we
appreciate
do
the
that,
concern,
please,
but
and
let's
then-
finish the interviews, and then I think whether all this Brown Act stuff applies or not is something that we should take up with council later.
We'll give you a chance to speak, Celia, promise. Rick, did you want to address everybody?
Not particularly, but I wanted particularly to give you all an opportunity to ask me questions, but since I was enjoying listening to everyone so much that I thought I would at least come up and say two words
Little bit louder,
about,
please, okay?
Really? Wow.
Yeah, it makes a difference.
Normally, I don't need a mic for a room like this, but okay, we'll speak up. So I'm Rick Artis. I moved to Kensington in the mid-'60s, grew up around here. My parents live 100 feet across the border in El Cerrito, went to local schools and to Cal, and then went off to the East Coast. I'm a chemist. I'm representing, along with Mabry, the chemistry contingent, and if there may be one other out there, but we've already blown the statistics out of the water. Just by having two of us in one room. There's quantum mechanical principle that says if we get three, it causes an antimatter explosion, I think. So I'm probably one of the least qualified from a public policy perspective by training to be on this committee, although I grew up in a house full of legal people, some of whom work for the county or the state Supreme Court, and married an attorney mediator, so I'm surrounded by lawyers and legal people. But that's not what I would...
Try not to hold that against you, okay?
Yeah. That's not what I would bring to the committee at all. What I do in my job, I design drugs for a living. I have an aspirational day. Every day I'm the inventor of a drug that's now standard of care for metastatic melanoma, which I hope none of you ever need. I'm probably the most likely person in the room to need it, actually, looking around. Yeah. So in order to do that in the modern world, you have to be able to look at a lot of data and get fantastically arrogant and talented people to think creatively about things that are mind-boggling and fun at the same time. This community has what I think is a tremendous opportunity right now to do the same thing. A lot of people are looking at the prospect of figuring out what we're doing from a data standpoint or an opinion standpoint, but somebody referred to the herding of cats, or kittens actually, I think it was. From a modern drug discovery perspective, you just, even before you get to the government, you can't believe how this process actually works. But what it requires is a very open mind and the willingness to scrutinize data without preconception and let the data drive you to a place where you can make conclusions. And so I brutally scrutinize data to the point where it sometimes tells me things I don't want to hear, but you can't argue with that because life and time is short. So that's what I will bring to the committee is, and my concerns from a community policy perspective are the financial well-being of the community, not just the district. I think this committee's charge is to look pretty expansively at how our community is functioning from a governance standpoint. And I personally think that's important. I don't know that our community is on a sustainable trajectory. And I've crunched a lot of numbers on this subject for both of our districts. And I can tell you that where that took me was not where I expected to go. So that's something I think that I can bring to the committee is an expansive view that isn't driven by politics. It's actually Gail's fault that I'm here because long ago at the KPOA meeting she said, I think we should talk about consolidation. And I literally didn't understand what she meant. And I'm one of those people for whom saying I don't understand something I view as a statement of personal limitation that I would like to deal with immediately. So I began trying to understand that from both a public policy perspective and a financial perspective so I could make a judgment on the issue. And I'm far into gathering data. I'm not so sure about making a judgment. It's a lot more complicated. So I respect the role of a committee. I'm very happy the board created it, but I respect the role of a committee in this process because it is very important that we get a lot of eyes on the data that we can use to drive the decision. Thanks. Questions? I'm happy to take.
Looks like we're good. Thank you. There was someone who, Christopher Depp, who was supposed to be here, not here yet. Oh, you made it. Great. Oh, okay. Good. Come on up. We're having trouble with the mic, so please.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
Is that okay? Christopher Deppy, lived here since '96. And the reason I want to be on the committee is I think it's a very important decision. I think the police department and the board and the controversy has really sort of split the community for a long time, and I think we need to get it right to hopefully heal the community. And also, you may not know, but I complain sometimes. And I thought, okay, it's easy to complain, it's easy to kip us from the sideline, but I really wanted to actually do something and make a difference, and so that's why I want to be on the committee, to help the decision instead of just complaining, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Do you have any questions for me?
Tell us what you do for your day job.
My day job.
How that might help you with your night job or your new life.
I work at Apple Computer. I'm a software engineer is kind of a broad term. I work on the performance team, so we analyze the performance of the system. If it's bad, we try to find out why. We try to make it better. So if you have a problem with the system, it's someone else's fault, but if it's working well, then it's something I made better. So I'm also a musician, but that's a career that I haven't really been actively pursuing for about 5 years. I've had both careers pretty much my whole life. But right now it's just Apple.
Time's not a problem?
Well, time's always a problem, but I wasn't here. I missed most of the fun, but I hear it's 2 times a month.
That's for the committee to decide.
Okay. I think it's fine. I'm willing to put the time in. I think it's important.
Anything else?
I do have some questions for the committee, if that's okay. Again, I wasn't here, but I heard something mentioned about a 20-month time limit for the committee. Is that correct?
We don't have any set time limit. It's going to take as long as it takes. Some people have this concept that it can be done in a very short time frame. Others think it's going to take longer. We've heard both sides of that issue. It's uncharted territory. You know,
sure.
It's a brand new thing we're doing. We don't quite know exactly how long it will take. Probably first thing your committee's going to want to do is try to figure out what reasonable deadlines are, and then check in once in a while and see if they're being met, and if they're not being met, what's holding it up.
I personally disagree with that. I actually think the board should impose a timeline, and then if the committee needs more time, then they should get it. But I don't think this should be up to the committee to decide. I think there are fact-finding committee. I believe that we need to impose a timeline. I'm like all judges, willing to be reasonable, but I do think that we need to have a shorter timeline than 20 months personally.
Yeah, I was going to say,
that's why the time commitment is important.
my initial reaction was a year, something like that. At Apple and most software businesses, if you don't have a timeline, it's not going to get done. It's just going to drag out. And also a year is a long time, and if it's longer, things tend to also drag out. I mean, Apple releases a new system every year, so it's...
Well, you need milestones along the way, too.
Sure,
And
absolutely.
part of what the point I was trying to make is you set milestones, and when you're at a certain point, you check in, you see if your assumptions were correct about where you were going to be, and if they're not, you figure out why.
Sure. But I think having a fixed time would be a benefit to the committee. Yes?
Last week, Chris and I exchanged emails because he was concerned that the chief's contract was set for a year, and that happened 9 months with a 23-month extender, and that might run out before we had decided what to do about splitting the GM chief of police. I told you then, and I'll say it again now, in my opinion, we don't make any hard decisions until the committee has weighed in to us. Now, that's my own personal opinion, and I think that's the way we need to treat it. So no decision really should be made until the committee has presented a world of alternatives to us to consider.
That was my other question, so thank you for bringing that up. Right, if you make a hiring decision before the committee's done, you've got to nail your feet to the floor, and you've already predetermined some conclusion, which is not the whole idea of the committee.
That's
so.
right. That's exactly
Okay.
right. Now, that's my opinion, but I think that's the way it should go out.
How does the rest of the board feel about that?
I think that's about right.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you.
Anything else? Thank you very much. Can we finish the interviews first? Make it fast.
I believe very strongly in the consensual process is the best way to make decisions. A long time ago, I attended a conference when I came into contact or participated in an exercise that was created by NASA to use with their working groups on teaching consensual process. It's very quick. There's about a one-paragraph description of how to conduct a consensual process, and I would offer it to the committee, either if I'm chosen for the committee or otherwise. I think it could be quite useful.
All right, thank you. Okay, go ahead.
President Welsh, could you recap what we're doing for those candidates who've walked in late after we described the process?
Yeah, we basically, some people couldn't make it tonight, most could, fortunately, and we are asking folks if they'd like to come up and give a little presentation on why they would like to be on this committee. You're not required to, but you're encouraged to. So if you'd like to come up and give us a statement, we're trying to keep it to about 3 minutes. Please do. I'm sorry, who here is still planning to speak and has not? Just you? Okay. Okay, come on up. Just remember to get close to that mic.
Yes, I remember kiss the mic. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
No. Sorry about that.
That's good. That's good. That's good.
So my name is Lori Trevino, and I submitted an application for the ad hoc committee, and I apologize for my lateness. It's
okay.
Been a interesting week for me in my professional life, but I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about my application and tell you a little bit about some of the concerns that I have as well.
Please go ahead and tell us what you think.
Sure. So well, let me just start with my background. So I've been in various roles in municipal government and finance for about 18 years. Most recently, a year ago, I left local government where I was with the city of El Cerrito and started working for Moody's Investor Service as a ratings analyst. So I do credit ratings for local government. That poses a bit of a challenge for me in that we are a very highly regulated company, and so I'm actually not permitted to do certain things without permission of our compliance office, which I have not received yet. So whatever I do, in my interest for helping the district, is subject to any conditions that are put on that by my employer. I should just state that right up front.
Do you have any sense of what restrictions there might be?
Typically, what the types of restrictions that are placed on involvement in community organizations would be providing any information that might be perceived as a credit opinion of the district, or investment advice, meaning that I was representing Moody's opinion about something that the district ought to do. So those are sort of the baseline assumptions. And I wouldn't be permitted to do any sort of ratings in my job that would in any way affect the district. And I wouldn't anyway, just because I live here, and that's something I would choose to recuse myself from as a matter of course. Excuse me. So that being said, I think that, generally it's really an issue for me about needing to be really clear about what I'm able to, with my compliance office, about what I'm able to do and not able to do. And in the past, when I did have a volunteer position, those were the limitations. It was really just about investment-related information, which I don't see as an issue here.
I don't.
I don't, but that doesn't mean they won't. I've already been through this one other time. That being said, my biggest issue, or my biggest interest in the district, is really about good governance. It's really my professional interest is how do we maintain good governance and good local government. And as you probably know from previous comments I made, I have concerns about the fiscal sustainability of the district. So those are the kinds of areas that I'm interested in looking at. I am concerned also about how this committee fits in with the 2009 initiative ordinance. I have a pretty strong feeling after doing some research that it's not actually a legally valid ordinance. And so there's part of me that feels like this committee might be, its activities might be either moot or working towards something that can't be implemented anyway. And so there's part of me that's very concerned about that, and I would actually like to suggest to the board that since the ordinance was not ever put to the voters, there's never been a legal analysis, which would have been required if it had been put on the ballot, of an analysis of its validity or illegality is not even required to put it on the ballot. So I'm assuming perhaps that was not done, and I wouldn't fault anybody one way or the other about that. But I think that your current legal counsel probably has more than sufficient ability to provide you the legal analysis of that, and I'm concerned because my understanding is that contracts are not subject to voter approval. They can't be by law, and that the voters cannot amend state law, which is there is state law that applies to all special districts that want to take certain actions related to divestiture of their powers. So I just think that this is something that the board really needs to think about. If this is where you're headed, if you want to think about governance issues, you really got to think about that ordinance, because I don't think it's exactly what everybody is claiming it is. So there you go.
So, Lori,
I've sort of laid it all out there.
My question to you is, what do you see the role of this committee being?
My understanding of the role of this committee is that we're trying to provide research and options for going forward in terms of how the district would provide police services and in a sustainable way. That's my understanding. And so it seems to me that the question of contracting is an option. I don't know that it's the best option, or what's the best option. I just know that it's the board's decision, and you can ask for advice, but it's not, I don't believe that it should be subject to voter approval, because I don't think that's what's provided for in state law.
Thank you. I was confused when you were contracting out.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's where I was confused.
Anything else?
Timing's not a problem for you?
It's always a problem, as
Well-
others have said.
They say give a busy person something to do and it gets done.
Yeah. I think if meetings are in the evenings and they don't conflict with, well, I don't think I have any other evening meetings at the moment, so it shouldn't be a problem, as long as it's not every week.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure, thank you.
So, does this bring us to the end of our applicant interviews?
Did we ever decide to do what to do about Mr. Bates?
We didn't, actually. He's not here, right?
When did he submit his application? I see it's dated August 1st, but I don't know when he submitted it.
We received it August 3rd.
I think we should, I mean, I personally think we should allow him to.
I do too, but he's not here to speak,
It
so.
doesn't matter.
Yeah. We don't have to disqualify him on that
Someone has an
basis.
objection. I mean, it is unfair to other people who met the timeline and people who didn't, who decided.
Oh, all right, why don't you do that real quickly? Thank you.
It does pose a problem for people who missed the deadline and didn't think about applying afterwards, but I think, excuse me, I'm not finished talking yet, so just a minute. So I do think that's an issue, but I don't think it's a significant issue, and I would allow him to be considered, regardless of whether he's here or not.
Yeah, I agree. I think, you know, somebody who wanted the position was late would ask, and is not there? Okay, so do we need a vote on that, whether to exclude his application or not?
Well, I'm going to take the opposing view, since the legal system is built on meeting deadlines that are sometimes immutable. And I would say that, you know, a miss is as good as a mile, and I'm sorry to say that, but August 1st was a pretty pronounced... Oh, I'm sorry, I'm drifting out of earshot here. I would say that if he missed the August 1st deadline, then I think, in fairness to those people who did not apply because they missed it too, you have to be consistent and apply it across the board. Did you guys hear that? I'm getting puzzled looks from Barbara.
Well, I spoke with Mr. Bates, and he, I think we can all acknowledge this recruitment process was flawed here and there. He noted that the due date was not on the application, and I think that I really see no compelling reason to exclude him if we didn't dot the i's and cross the t's fully.
Well, it sounds like something we need to vote on. So I'm going to move that we not exclude Mr. Bates's application.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, so we have one opposition from Chuck Toombs. The rest are in favor. Motion passes.
So I have one other point of order, point of consideration, and that is, I wonder if we should choose alternates as well as the 10 members, just in case, like Miss America, he or she is unable to serve. Oh, I hate to reference that. It might bring up images of Trump. No, he's
Burt Parks. We'll think of Burt Parks.
Yeah, thank you, Burt Parks. I'm not quite sure how we would do it. Maybe we just have 5 alternatives, and if somebody can't serve for some reason, we could put names in a hat and pick somebody out. I don't know.
I like
it
that
dawned
very
on me
much.
today.
Rochelle and I actually just had this discussion at dinner that we invited you to, and you didn't get the email. But we thought that for those who were not appointed by the board, that we could perhaps select 1 or 2 as non-voting alternates who, you know, are more than welcome to participate in the meetings, but we thought maybe 2.
How will we make said selection?
Well, number one, I would be not in favor of them participating in the meetings, because I think that's going to just increase the committee. And
Yeah, I agree with that. But,
so I don't know if
but
they should
selecting
participate in
them,
the
how do we do that?
committee, but that's why I think we should just do 5, stick their names in a hat, then we don't, I hate to make this a popularity contest.
I guess, you know, in KMAC, I'll just, when I was an alternate, I attended every meeting just in case I needed to make a judgment call. So if they're not engaged throughout the process, and then we have to insert them in the process, that's a lot to ask of someone. That's the only reason I propose that they be engaged from the fore. But
Mr. Deppie, if you're going to talk, I need you to go to the mic. I've gotten, well, sorry to interrupt you. I just want to make sure that I've got a lot of people that tell me, please have everyone go to the mic, and I'm doing my job.
Thank you. No, I think that you'd want to check with a person if they wanted to attend the meetings but not really be a part of the committee, because probably some people wouldn't be interested in that.
So Pat, are you suggesting that we make our 2 choices apiece, and then we go through a third round of choosing alternates, 1 apiece? All right. Well,
Yeah, and then in my system, although I really do understand what Vanessa is saying, that it would be hard to be dropped into the process 6 months in if you hadn't been part of it. But to expand the committee by 5 people and have that many other voices in the room, do they get to talk? Do they not get to talk? I just think it's concerning, but I get the concern.
could the committee, once convened, determine how many alternates it might need, rather than us?
We have to pick them. I'm sorry, I think we have to pick the alternates. So the question is, do you just have 2 who want to come along and sit at every meeting and watch, or do you want to expand the committee to be 12, or
well, that's
what?
typically what alternates do. They don't participate. They either don't come or they come and they don't speak. In my experience.
Not on KMAC. They're present, but they don't vote. They're part of the discussion, but they don't have a vote.
I don't think we want them to be part of the discussion. I think the purpose was to have a small committee that could operate quickly. So I would not be in favor of allowing them to speak.
What about, oh, sorry, no, I was going to say that, what if we make our selections tonight? I'm not trying to make this too cumbersome. And then anyone who would like to be considered as an alternate could give us their name, and we could perhaps make 2 selections on Thursday. Would that be, well, that wouldn't be noticed, but, because otherwise we are left with 5, is that?
We could also start a list of those who were not chosen who could contribute in a way that wasn't committee-related, as an alternate or as a consultant, like Mr. Carlson proposed, but we didn't really flesh this part of the process out.
Well, can't an alternate be briefed by the person who was attending the meeting? What do you mean, no? I've been to many meetings where that happens.
First of all, do we need 5 alternates if this is not?
So that wasn't my suggestion, just to clarify.
Okay.
My suggestion was each of us picks an alternate, we put the names in a hat, pick 2 out if you need them.
All right, sounds good to me.
So it just is.
Does that work for you, Vanessa?
A little bit more random process.
Yeah, how about, I agree with you, but we just pull them out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and rank them as a running order of 5? Okay, thanks. All right.
And would that order be purposes of selection? We'd go from numerical to 1, 2, if there was openings or vacancies and someone couldn't serve?
Yes.
Okay.
See, sometimes it's good to have lawyers on the committee, the jury system.
I was going to say, I think when you have a committee of 10, you probably have enough people to stay the course, and so that just go with your 10. If you drop below your quorum or something, you're going to have to do something, but it's going to be hard for an alternate to get up to speed. And another point is that when you've got all these meetings that I presume a lot of them will be public, you're going to have to monitor your concept of public input. You know how that goes. So you have a little bit of contradiction. I think you could just stick with your 10 and there's enough interest that people will stay the course. Enough people will stay the course.
I have to say, if an alternate can't be briefed, let's say somebody says, I got to resign, and an alternate, it's not acceptable for an alternate to be briefed because they won't have participated in the process, how in the world is the board going to get briefed? Yes, you can brief somebody on what's taken place. You can summarize what the history has been. You can summarize what the issues have been. That, in fact, is what the board is going to be presented with from time to time that we have to make decisions on. So, Paul, go ahead.
This is actually a question that's directed toward the lawyer, and it's based upon my understanding of the Brown Act, that anything that's a public meeting under the Brown Act must allow for public input, both before the meeting under public comment and at some point during the deliberations of the body. Is that correct?
Yes, and I mean, I haven't seen any suggestion that's not going to be the case.
Okay, there was some discussion here about having alternates who couldn't participate in the discussion. They would be allowed to discuss, just as a matter of the Brown. Yeah, no vote. Okay.
Yeah. Well, the question, maybe it's better for the committee to figure this out, but they can always get up as a member of the public, obviously, and speak if that's what the point is.
Yeah, that I guess is really what they have to say. It has to be understood if they are speaking just as a member of the public and without any special authority vis-a-vis the committee. Correct?
Yeah. I mean, you may want to give some thought to maybe doing this at your next meeting in terms of, I mean, you're not going to lose, hopefully, anybody between now and September. You may want to give some thought to maybe just having this as a separate agenda item and working through it. I mean, the agenda itself says you're picking 2 each for
There's
tonight.
the bowl.
And, it may also, the additional time may give you some ability to determine who's not going to be selected tonight and which of those folks may be interested in being alternates. Just a suggestion.
So Randy, are we prohibited from doing more than picking 2 tonight? Is that what you're saying?
Noticed.
Well, that's the way it's agendized, is you're each picking 2.
All right, let's do that, and we'll do the alternates at another meeting. So as for how we begin the picking process, I would like to suggest that maybe Lynn?
I think it was starting at that end.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I just thought it was the podium.
So I was thinking Rochelle would begin. Does that work? Vanessa
That's how
begins?
Jim sort of counted us on that meeting,
Okay.
but that's fine. 1 and 10. You get 5 and 6.
Okay. Is that all right?
All right, shall we go?
My head's spinning.
Okay. My first appointment, let's see, will be Ms. Mickey Tall.
Karen Corbett?
That's what I want to write it down.
Yeah.
Rick Artis.
That leaves me with number 4. Gail Feldman. I am
Oh, so
terribly
sorry. The first pick was Mickey Tall. Second pick, the first Mickey Tall by Vanessa. Second pick was Garen Corbett by Pat Gillette. Third pick was Rick Artis by me. And Chuck? Rick Artis by me. And Chuck, go ahead.
I said Gail Feldman.
Gail Feldman.
I'm going to editorialize for just a moment because there's so many wonderful people. We could fill this committee twice over again, obvious. And so thank you all for applying because I know that I won't get another chance to say thank you. Thank you. I am so impressed and amazed. And some of you said that you were nervous. We should have been nervous to hear about your expertise and your commitment to Kensington. So thank you. If you're not chosen, please come or come to Parks Buildings because I would love you. So you're wonderful. And my first selection is Lori Trevino.
Everybody get that? Lori Trevino?
And my second selection is Chris Deppie.
And that brings it back to me then. Just so you know, before Rich Carlson left, he said he was taking his name out of the running because he didn't want to have to worry about the Brown Act issue, so he's no longer a potential candidate here. But Lisa Corona, who did not come tonight, is my second choice.
Dave Spath.
Someone who's not here, Tim Snyder. Sorry, Tim Snyder.
Tim Snyder. Can you hear? Thanks.
My second choice is Mr. Charles Reichman, who could not attend this evening. Charles Reichman.
His material's in the package if you wanted to look at it. So maybe Lynn can read down the whole list so we make sure we got it all right.
Okay, we have Mickey Tall, Garen Corbett, Rick Artis, Gail Feldman, Lori Trevino, Chris Deppie, Lisa Corona, David Spath, Jim Snyder, and Charles Reichman.
Tim Snyder, I think, is.
Oh,
not
Tim?
Jim.
I'm sorry, Tim Snyder.
I move that we appoint the 10 individuals just named to the ad hoc committee.
Second the motion.
Great.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. We have our committee.
Before you all go, I also wanted to echo what Rochelle said. We really have an abundance of riches here, and there's so many qualified, competent people. I just didn't know quite how to make the right choice, so do stick around. Thank you all.
Yeah, I want to echo that every single person I heard, I think, was qualified to do this work. I do think we wanted a good cross-section, which I think we got. We wanted new blood, we wanted old blood, we wanted intermediate blood, and I think we got all of that. So, anyway,
I
thanks.
also would like to thank everybody, and I want to call out a few people who I think deserve recognition, although not chosen. I said I want to call out a few people who I think deserve recognition, although they weren't chosen, because we're lucky to have people in this room who have dedicated a lot of time and energy to this community over the years. And I want to start with Paul Doro, who withdrew his name, but I'm sorry you did that, Paul, because I think you would have been a great addition to the committee. Bruce Morrow, Lynn Schwartzberg, Mabry Benson, and who am I leaving out? Paul Haxo, all of whom have given time and energy to this community over the years, not just tonight or not just these last 2 years, but year after year after year. And what's interesting about that group is that everybody has different opinions, and yet all of them came here with the desire to help us figure out how to move our community forward. And that, to me, is constructive, good citizenship and what we need for our democracy to function both here in Kensington and in the United States. So, not to be overly patriotic, but many thanks to all of you who've given your service.
Hi. I was leaving, and Pat, I really liked what you just had to say, because I left feeling very upset about how this was finished off, because I know you had agreed that you could pick people who were not here, but many of the times there were questions of, will different candidates be able to appear at the required meetings? And yet there were candidates that were chosen tonight who are not here tonight, and others who made a big effort to be here tonight to be able to come up and talk about themselves. So I just want to register my concern that this, I think there was a lot of good thought and a lot of growth in what this committee is going to do, and I think that by having the various candidates come forward, there was a lot of very important information that was added to help grow this committee that has very little formation when we came here tonight, in essence. Yes, there's something that was written up, but there's a lot of dimension that was added to this committee by people that came here and gave of their time, and yet several people that were not here could not be here were chosen for this particular committee, and I find that very absurd. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to address that because I should have said, should have said that earlier on. I was concerned personally that there was not enough notification given to applicants about this evening. So I did not feel that it could be a part of my decision-making process. So I should say a couple things. Whether you rent or owned was never part of my decision-making process. How long you'd been in Kensington, not part of my decision-making process. And the same with, unfortunately, whether or not you could be here. It would have been a bonus, but because of notification, and life, we know that things happen, that just could not be part of the decision-making process ultimately, even though it was very illuminating and helpful to have everyone be here and did not have my mind made up, so.
I move we adjourn. Oh.
Just as a matter of process, since there was a discussion about selecting alternatives, we have a meeting on Thursday night. We can't put it on that agenda. Is there another board meeting before September's start date we could put this on, other than the September board meeting?
Well, there's no urgency, right? I mean, we've got a committee of 10. Nobody's resigned yet, so
well,
maybe that'll change.
The only reason I raise it at all is because Lori does have to check with her compliance officer about whether she can continue on.
Well,
and
can I
yeah,
ask a
but
question?
you know,
Can I pose something? It's just, if Lori is forced to resign, as an example, wouldn't Rochelle get the opportunity to reappoint?
Well, that's why we're choosing alternatives. That's the question.
But, you know...
I mean, that makes sense. It makes perfect sense because her first choice...
Could we do it that way?
That's one way to go about it.
Ms. Walter looks like she has an idea.
Well...
Oh, you are? Okay.
As someone who selects juries for a living, I would say that the makeup of the committee might be different depending on who was chosen. So I'm not sure that it reverts back to the person who made that selection. Just thought I'd offer that.
Well, that's why we put 3 in the hat then.
Well, I would like to take this up at the October meeting. Pat's going to be gone in September. I think we should have a full board to work out this alternate issue. So if we're all good with that, let's calendar it for October. Okay?
September?
Pat's going to be gone in September.
Oh, okay.
All right. So did somebody want to make a motion?
I move we adjourn.
Before we do that, Mr. President.
Inches.
Before we do that, is there any direction relative to, that you may have for me, in reference to notifying those that may or may not have necessarily have been here tonight, organizing at least at a minimum the first meeting, gathering, setting up a time, date, and so forth, just to, can I get a little bit of direction, so just get the ball rolling for the committee, and then from there, they can make their appointments, they can make their, and then I'm kind of, will back out.
Okay, so in other words, you're saying you would kick the process off by helping them all set a date for their first meeting, maybe attending and just making sure that everything's taken care of. Right. But you would not run the meeting, they'll run the meeting, and then from that point, you are out of it.
Correct. And the first order of business, though, that I would recommend, and I will put the first agenda together for them, will be something that I would recommend, and our attorney has agreed, and that is at least a 30-minute training session on the Brown Act.
Yeah.
I think that's a great, wonderful offer.
Fabulous.
So at least we can get that going, and then I can at least develop a little bit of agenda, and then leave the meeting, and it's run by the community.
I'm wondering if members of the public could observe that.
It's a public meeting.
All right.
Absolutely.
I'll be there. I can use
but
refreshment.
it's not a full. There's actually it's a 2-hour, as everyone knows, it's a 2-hour session online that anyone that is so interested can take a 2-hour, online self-tutorial on the Brown Act if they want. But this will be an abbreviated edition, I believe. That
could you email all the chosen committee members that URL as
sure.
part of this?
I can do that, and I'll advise them that the tentative plan is to, at least the beginning of the meeting would be, is to have a 30-minute presentation on the Brown Act.
Okay, great. I'm sorry, Cecile, I promised you an opportunity to speak.
Celia, thank you.
Did you, just for clarity, Mr. President, did you want me to send a regret to inform you email, or?
Yes, we should definitely say thank you for applying, and
Okay.
you may be tapped in the future as an alternate.
Okay, and I can actually certainly discuss that if you'd like me to, if that's a consistent majority that the October will be on the agenda for October. Is that what I see?
Yes.
And I'm actually happy to phone those who were not selected, personally, if you
I'm
feel
sure that the board, they'll probably find out before I get a chance to
Okay.
do it first thing in the morning, I'm sure, so.
Celia, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's all right, thank you. I just wanted to be clear on the committee, the ad hoc committee itself is subject to the Brown Act, but that if the committee selects a subcommittee to look into something, that subcommittee would not be subject to the Brown Act.
If the
If it
committee
is made up-
if the committee creates an ad hoc committee consisting solely of members of the committee that's less than a quorum of the committee, then under the way the Brown Act works, they would not be subject to the
And
Brown Act.
so a quorum in
But
this
one
case
thing,
is...
just I'll say, one thing the committee could decide would be that it wants its subcommittees to nonetheless, meet in public or do whatever they want to do when they form those subcommittees. But legally, under the Brown Act, they would, if they form an ad hoc committee themselves consisting solely of their own members, less than a quorum of that committee, then it would not be subject to the Brown Act.
So Randy, a quorum of this
How
10-member committee is going to be what, 6?
6.
So
I'd actually
5 or less, 5 or fewer.
In the interest of transparency, I'd actually opt that every committee meeting you hold is a public meeting.
Well, yeah, they should all be announced as public.
Yeah. I mean, even if it's less than a quorum if it's a subcommittee of 5, I'd still think you'd want to have it as a public meeting. I hate to put you through that, but the whole purpose is to let the community come in and participate and say what they'd like about what this committee or subcommittee is doing. Just a thought.
We didn't notice our meetings, you and I.
Well, because we were less than a majority of the board.
We were less than, but
Yeah.
the subcommittee would,
There are cases where you need to roll up your sleeves and do work, and you don't want to have a public forum, so I
just saying.
think we shouldn't tie their hands in that way. Go ahead, Garen.
Well, thank you. That actually just said my words. I do think that, setting the general tone and direction that the board's expression is, when possible, even with subcommittees, to make them public. But I do think, it would be unwieldy if 2 or 3 people are going to interview other stakeholders, other, entities, that this would just become very difficult.
Right, they do more than meet, they do tasks and things like that. So
Right.
the magic word is less than a quorum, meaning 5 or fewer.
Got it.
My name's Andrew Gutierrez. The question was raised by Lori Trevino concerning the legality. Concerning the legality of the. Sorry?
He can't hear you, you need to get close to the mic.
The question was raised by Lori Trevino whether the ordinance that was passed by the board was legal and binding, that we would have to have an election if we were to change directions in terms of the operation of the police in Kensington. I think it's incumbent upon us that we get a ruling on that early. rather
Randy,
than
could
late.
we get a little legal opinion on that?
I'm not sure it'll be little, but
I want a little one, with a little price tag.
I'll use little letters.
Okay. So it would be nice to get some sort of analysis, as Mr. Gutierrez has requested, help to clarify that issue. Okay? Fair enough?
My true colors will be revealed at this moment.
I'm sorry, if I can interrupt you, I just want to, for point of clarification, are we taking open comment again?
Well, we
No,
are...
this isn't exactly open comment. It has to do with the topic at hand.
Well, even the topic at hand really wasn't
Oh,
noticed.
isn't on the...
the motion is to
Right.
to adjourn the meeting. That's the item on the floor.
And the topic at hand wasn't really part of this meeting, but...
It's about, this is a very simple question. It's just when exactly does the committee consider itself formed? And the reason I ask, and the reason why I say this reveals much, is that before that time, the committee could actually get together and have a beer or a glass of wine and not be subject to the Brown Act, and perhaps get to know one another before being cast into the fire.
Well, I think we formed the committee tonight.
You've been baptized, so.
So
You
the
can get
committee's
together,
formed
but you
as of right this moment.
Yeah, you're it. You're a committee member and you're out of order.
Yeah,
Sorry, guys, I had a really good bottle of wine picked out.
You can still
Okay.
convene, just not discuss business.
So we
Work on the microphone.
I am badgering our staff just about every single day about it. Do we have an estimate, Kevin?
I have
that's
not
actually-
pulled the trigger. I
yeah.
don't have a budget until Thursday, so.
And that's not an item, so I think we have a motion on the floor that's
Yeah, we
to
do.
move.
Thursday, okay? We'll take comment period, okay?
I second the motion.
To adjourn?
All right.
Yes.
Any further discussion on the motion?
Only thing
All in
about-
favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. We're adjourned.
I came close.